Awesome. Welcome, everybody. This is Sajit Nair. I have with me Cidoni. We're both from Trundl, and we are going to, in the next 1 hour, talk about connecting strategy to execution. Now, this is a very open kind of a fireside chat. That's the reason we wrote that in the title itself. We wanted to keep the session very open. If you have any questions, if you have any comments that you would want to share in the chat, please feel free to do that. We'd be very happy to talk to you as we go along. If you have any specific question and answer, please put that in the Q&A so that we can take that up in the end. We're going to go through some slides, then we're going to go through some actual demos. So we'll be, kind of shuffling between these two things. All right. So first of all, thank you all for joining in. I know this is a very contentious spot, and there are some amazing sessions that are happening. And we thank you that you joined our session. And before we begin, I think Cidoni, maybe we should reveal a little bit about ourselves, why people should listen to our session, and why this session is important.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Sajit. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining. Like Sajit mentioned, a lot of great sessions happening today at the same time, particularly. So we truly appreciate you joining ours. Like Sajit said, and this is an important topic, right? Connecting strategy to execution, which usually has created a lot of challenges for organizations to be effective. Right. So we are going to look at how these things formulate and how these things connect, and also see a demo of how we can see that and visualize that in a tool like Jira. So Sajit and I, we've been with Atlassian ecosystem for several years now. We gathered our skills through experience, utilizing the tool, administering it, through some certifications that you can see over there, and then really a collective of close to 40 years of experience that we've gathered across different companies, and then our observations is really, we are trying to culminate all of that into this 30 minutes, hopefully packed session for you to, hopefully take some value out of this back to your organizations and for your personal growth.
Right. And now that you've known us a little bit, you can see some of our credentials, some of our experience on the slide. It's time we get to know you guys a little bit as well. So our tech host Kashyap is going to help us with a quick poll. Please let us know what's your role in your organization. You would have some options there in the poll. Please, mention those and make sure that you are doing that. And we'll continue with the session. Please mention if you're not able to see the poll as well in the chat. I'm going to monitor the chat. All right. So are you from an executive background, a manager, an engineer, analyst, from operations? Just give out some inputs. We are getting some percentages here as well. We're getting some around 30% leadership, 30% manager, supervisor, operations is there. Engineer is also there, somewhere around 12% Cidoni. So kind of like a mixed batch now that we have a full list. There's also other, which is very interesting now that it has taken over everything else. But thank you for giving that insight, everybody. It helps us understand where we want to keep our examples and where we want to keep our our demo focused towards. So now that we know, right? So let's start talking about some of the strategy and the execution conversation that we wanted to have. And before we actually step into the topic of strategy, we would want to talk about where the strategy actually come from, right? And what is strategy? So Cidoni, what is strategy and where does it actually come from?
Yeah, I think you, as you rightly pointed out, it's very important to know where it comes from first, right? Before we even dive deeper into what actually it means. This is where I think we should definitely talk about the vision and mission of organizations, right? Where what's the North Star that a company is trying to go to, right? This is a vision is an aspirational goal. Right. This is the place where we, as an organization, we want to be over time. And this basically communicates the purpose of this organization, right? It communicates the critical question of why this organization exists in the first place, right? So this basically vision statements usually tries to paint that picture of where we are heading, right? So what's going to be, how's our world going to look like in 5 to 10 years from now?
Right.
So
So,
that's basically what
yeah.
vision statement is all about.
Right. So now that we've heard of what vision statement basically is that big mountain that you're seeing in that pretty image that Cidoni has put on the slide. Let's look at maybe a couple of examples and try to see if we are able to understand what those vision means for some of the popular companies. Right. All right. Let's look at some vision, and please feel free to use the chat, guys. Let's see if you can respond. Uh, which company is this vision of? We believe beauty should be source of confidence and not anxiety. We are here to help every woman build positive relationship with the way they look, helping them raise their self-esteem and realize their full potential. Any guesses? Wow, right out of the bat, Vicky with the right answer. Dove, that's right. That is the vision statement of Dove. And that's what a vision statement should be, right, Sid? I mean,
Yeah.
the moment you read it, you are able to understand that, yes, this is from that company. And it makes sense. Let's look at the next one. We make the best possible ice cream in the best possible way. That should be easy. Come on, guys. Ben and Jerry's. That's
Vicky's
right.
on fire.
Vicky's on fire. Murli, the right answer as well. All right, let's look at the next one. To uplift everyone everywhere by being the best way to pay and be paid. Now, that should be PayPal, not PayPal, Visa. Manohar comes in with the answer Visa. There's also Venmo that is coming in. Yeah, all in the same industry. But the right answer is Visa. So now you understand, right? Like these companies have positioned themselves and their vision so beautifully. Not even you didn't even need to look at the logo, right? You read about their vision statement and you are able to understand what vision that they were talking about. So now that we know vision, let's talk about mission also. And how does this differentiate from vision, Sidoni?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, a lot of companies actually use vision and mission almost interchangeably also, right? But there is a difference. We talked about vision being where we are trying to go, and a mission statement is a representation of what's happening right now, what's going on in your organization right now, right? That's the mission we are on right now, right? It defines the business, it defines our objectives and how we are going to succeed in them. That's what a mission statement is all about.
Perfect. So mission statement is what drives the behavior of the people of the company. So now
That is
let's
correct.
look at some of the mission examples. All right, same logic. Guess the company in the chat. Mission is to unlock the potential of human creativity by giving artists the opportunity to live off the art and to fans to enjoy and be inspired by it. Any guesses, chat? Etsy? Good guess, but no, not Pinterest, not Etsy. Society 6. Wow, Wiki. Think a little more mainstream music. Let me give you that hint. Spotify, Charlotte, Megan, Chaitanya, Spotify. That's the right answer. So Spotify's mission statement is what we had displayed. Let's look at the next one. To organize world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. This should be very easy. Google. That's right. MG with the right answer there.
I mean,
Let's.
Wikipedia, I'm seeing Wikipedia coming through. It's like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's an
yeah.
interesting guess. Yeah. All right, let's
Yeah,
look
yeah,
at one
yeah,
more.
definitely. Uh, the third one is making communication frictionless. Let's see if people can guess that. Charlotte with Greg says CIA, which is a brilliant answer. Charlotte with the right answer with Zoom, and yeah, that's the mission statement. I mean, making communication frictionless. Zoom with the right answer. Perfect. So now that we've seen some vision and some mission, right? So how do these actually relate towards that destination? Let's come back to strategy. How does the mission and vision relate to it, Sidoni?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, right, this is really about where strategy comes from, right? Your vision and mission actually drives that. Now, There's a great book that I always recommend by Patrick Lencioni. The book is called The Advantage, right? This book talks about organizational health, how an organization behaves, how the teams and the people behave inside of it, and how they work together. Right? Again, like we saw, vision is the aspirational goal. It's your North Star, right? It's where we are trying to go to. And it's important that everybody understands that, right? In this book, Patrick Lencioni talks about 6 critical questions, right? I'll mention the first 2 here, right? The first one is, why do we exist, right? Really the vision statement, right? Second one is, how do we behave, which is usually the mission statement. The third and the fourth questions are, okay, then what do we do and how do we succeed? That's basically what strategy tells you. Now, when you are looking at strategy, when you're trying to define a strategy, it's important to understand what your vision and mission is driving your organization towards, right? And that would tell us what we need to do today and how we are going to succeed in getting to that vision. Right? So in the book, he mentions that it's a set of intentional decisions that an organization makes to give itself the best chance to thrive and compete. Right? And one thing to remember here is just having a great strategy is just not going to be enough, right? There is another crucial factor that we all need to be mindful of when somebody looks at a strategy. Any guesses?
You might want to give out some hint in what direction they should think, Cidoni.
Yeah. So what do you think is needed for a strategy to be effective? Right. So as strategy, we are defining, hey, what do we need to do? Right. How are we going to succeed? Those are things we are trying to define. But what do we need? What's the crucial element that's going to be important for the success of a strategy coming to reality? Right. It's culture, right?
John
It's your
says
culture, right? If your organization does not support a good culture, then your strategy is not going to be effective, right? Your vision and mission leads to a certain behavior from the company or the people in the company. That behavior over time, when it spreads out, it reflects as your culture, right? And culture actually impacts strategy, right? If we don't have people aligned, if you don't have people willing to work together to common goals, it's going to break down. The strategy is going to break down because teams are going to go in all different directions, right? One of the best examples that I can quote for that is when DevOps started coming up, right? In mid 2000s, when development teams were just focused on development and building new features. Operations teams were focused only on like getting or releases or really production stability. They had competing goals. Development teams always wanted to build new features. Right? They want let's go fast, right? On the other side, the operations teams were like, slow down. You're breaking systems, right? You're breaking production. Slow down. Don't go this fast. Competing goals, right? That will reflect, in the culture. Why does this happen, right? Because then there's not a common vision, not a common goal that we are trying to work towards. And that will reflect in the culture because these teams are going to create friction between themselves and the organization's health is going to go down the drain, right? And then on top of it, you put whatever strategy you want, none of that is going to work, right? And, Peter Drucker is a very famous Austrian-American management consultant. He's an author as well. He actually quoted this, which I think sums up it really nice, right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So it's very important to focus on that, to make sure that you have a foundation to make the strategy realize.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I really like that quote. I mean, I've quoted it to everybody that, I think I've had a conversation around with culture because I think it sums it up, its importance so nicely. And it was, I believe, not one of the actual keynote for Teams 22 as well, with I think Scott and Anu, where we talked about effective teamwork and how it was the need of the time when it came to working in today's, changing dynamics. So We talk about culture and we talk about strategies, but how do you represent these strategies that are easily understandable by the team members or the people who have to follow that, Cidoni?
Yeah, that's great. I see that Charlotte mentioned that in the chat as well, right? It's understandable by everybody.
Yeah.
And here's where again, I'll mention a quick. This is a story that Larry Page, the founder of Google, actually captured in the foreword of a book called Measure What Matters, right? Measure What Matters was written by John Doerr. So John Doerr in that book talks about OKRs. OKRs stand for objectives and key results, right? As a way to represent strategy. So in 1999, John Doerr was also part of the board, Google board. He was invited to do this lecture for Google. And then he introduced OKRs to them, right? From John's experience from being at Intel. So they adopted that. Larry Page found that as a very powerful way to express the strategy, and also for leadership, and knowing that we have a fair amount of leadership participation here also. Larry Page found that this was a productive way to push back, right, on priorities. So, one of the things that he asked at that time, or he was talking about, the way to understand this is like, if you are working on YouTube, when I click on play button, the video instantly starting and playing for the user might be a lot more important than some other priority you might have coming up next quarter. So it just, you are able to use that as a mechanism to make sure people understand, like Charlotte was making the comment there, everybody understands what the priority is, right? So OKRs is a well-known way of expressing this, expressing strategy as objectives and key results, right? There are, John Doerr was actually a venture capitalist on one of the organizations I worked on. I know John Clopton is also on the attendees here. He was there as well. OKRs was the thing there. So there are different ways you can measure this as well, but there are subtle differences. But we'll go look at what OKR is in a little more detail. OKR basically, objective and key result. The objective part expresses what you are trying to achieve. It should be inspirational. It should be clear and memorable. Again, going back to the same point that I'm hearing here too, right? It's easily understandable, easily memorable, so that everybody knows what our objectives are. Now that's drawing, if you remember those two questions from Patrick Lencioni's book, right? The third question of what do we do, right? That's your objectives, right? And then how are we going to succeed, right? How will we succeed in that? That's where the key results come in, right? You're going to indicate that as an outcome, right? It's not an activity, right? It's not, okay, do this task type of thing, right? It's an outcome so that we have a way to measure it, right? And it obviously should be measurable so that we can understand whether we have achieved that objective or not.
So while we are talking about OKRs, maybe we should look at some examples, Cidoni.
Yeah. And what I've done is I've put a few handful of examples here from kind of different aspects, right? Hopefully, some of these will resonate with some things you have seen in your world, right? So let's say you have a marketing team or a product team or both, right? And you want to make sure that when you're launching this product, you want to make sure get that product gain the primary market share, right, in its category. Right? So objective could be gain primary market share on this product, right? And then the key results could be, okay, X million revenue through subscriptions, an NPS score of 9 or more, right? Or the product should be listed in Gartner's Magic Quadrant 1, so that it establishes that market share, right? So that could be an example. So this is from a product marketing standpoint. Now, corporate teams also could have similar OKRs, right? An HR team could have an objective to make new team members effective faster, right? There might, the key results could be, a well-defined onboarding process is established, right? Employee satisfaction score, or X number of, or X percentage of employees are in projects in a specific amount of time, right? So it's important, if you notice, right, these results, we have to make sure that they are measurable. Okay, I will look at a couple more, and we'll kind of try to keep moving. Um, from an infrastructure side, maybe I want to have applications infrastructure that's scalable. Right? Scalability of application infrastructure is another example. The measurable goals could be, hey, this, a lot of these pieces are in on-prem hardware that's not easily scalable. I need to migrate them to cloud, right? So 80% of the system should be in cloud by, a certain date, or auto scaling of 50% of the systems on load. Only then we can actually support the scalability or support the increased traffic, right? Performance complaints, things like that, right? Reduction in performance complaints. That's from an infrastructure standpoint, as an example. If you have a website, right, this is a little more technical, but probably a product facing or customer facing web product, right? You want page loads to be faster. Monthly visitor targets, things like that could be your specific key results that you would want to target. And now,
So
there.
sorry,
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead,
there
Sajit.
was there was just some lag at mine. But OKRs make sense when it comes to trying to understand how the key results tie in with the objectives. But are there any other ways in which we can look at this?
Yeah, so a lot of companies represent OKRs, whether as OKRs or goals or KPIs. KPIs is another popular one. We'll take a look at how KPIs and OKRs can compare. But there are different ways to represent strategies, right? KPI is a little more quantifiable, measurable, like a very specific target that you're working towards, right? And it's a metric that you're always tracking towards to see whether you're making progress or not. Again, it's a lot more numbers driven KPIs, where objectives are a lot more action oriented and goals driven. There are things, my observation, I'm not going to drain the slide here, but there are some aspects of KPIs that I've seen that could be useful in terms of in tracking OKRs as well, right? Looking at specific target metrics and taking actions based on, like, okay, we have a 2 million target, half of the time has passed and we are still at like 500K, right? We may have to do something different. In a lot of times KPIs are more long lasting. You've seen companies set a KPI and like, okay, here's the KPI for a year or two. OKRs typically tend to change, right? You're adapting a lot more often with OKRs, but in theory you could use either of those things. But the nutshell of all of this thing, right, is your vision statement, your mission statements are telling where you're heading, right? It's painting that picture of where you're going. Your strategy is your technique to get there, right? Now, which means that if you don't adopt the right way of doing things and do not craft these strategies properly, it could get you into trouble, right? So, Sajit, I would like to kind of turn the table around and ask you, what kind of pitfalls and gotchas do we need to watch out for when you're trying to define some of these strategies?
Right. So those strategies definitely have to be thought through completely and very, detailed and in careful manner. Because if you're if you're front of the engine, or the plan itself isn't in the right direction, it's going to cause trouble for everybody who's following it, right? And specifically in today's landscape, where the typical challenges include implementing a digital transformation plan, competing with other vendors, teams, or innovating outside your comfort zone to make sure that you're delivering a product in a specific time. The focus comes down to something called execution. So you can build all the strategies that you want, but when are you going to connect it with execution? That's where the focus has to be. Thomas Edison once famously said, vision without implementation is just hallucination, right? And there's this very interesting HBR article that I've posted in the link on, like, would recommend everybody to go check that out. It's a brilliant issue, and it has some really good, interesting conversations around how how you can move from strategy to execution, right? So I wanted to talk about specifically 4 questions. When you're trying to do something like that, try to ask yourself 4 questions. Try to ask whether your strategy is aligned with the level of ambition, whether the ambition or the goals that you have set, are those unrealistically optimist or are those irrationally pessimist, right? So I'm going to spend a little time, just 30 seconds or 1 minute, on this specific point, because that's where a lot of teams that I have worked with, I've seen them struggle, right? Imagine a startup founder who believes that their new mobile app, who has not undergone any market research or testing, will become overnight sensation and generate millions and dollars in the first week of launch itself, right? That overconfidence might immediately attract, some level of user base, but it's not going to stick around. You need to have a clear marketing strategy to support that expectation. You need to have talent who's going to build those kind of features for those users to stay there, right? That unwarranted optimism can lead to poor decision making. On the other hand, imagine a well established company facing a temporary decline in quarterly profits due to maybe some fluctuations in demand. Now, despite being a very famous company, they might maybe let go of some of their resources, fearing that we might be hitting we might need to save some cost and reduce salaries, those kind of things, and they would come to the brink of a collapse. So these two things are like the two ends under which you need to carefully keep at the corners of your eye, right? How unrealistically optimist are you, or how irrationally pessimist are you? After that, talk about whether you have the necessary capabilities. Do you have the team that is required to build something like this? And then at the end, the most important thing, you need to have correct feedback loops. When you are building a strategy, if it does not feed in from a full cycle and come back to the top with inputs from the people who've actually worked on it, it does not make sense, because people inside the boardroom who are going to set that strategy going, they are not going to understand what is working or what's not working. So that feedback loop has to feed it back to the people who were having that conversation on the day one, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, that kind of a belief becomes very tough to manage forward.
Yeah, I think combining that with what we talked about, some OKRs, living, in a quarter, or a few months, right? That's really an opportunity. You need to look at, okay, is my vision still the same, right? Are we still heading the right direction? And should my strategy change, right? Should I put a
Correct.
different objective and different set of key results, right? And then work towards that, right? Don't have to abandon the organization, right? Things can happen. Who predicted the pandemic to happen, right? So it's really figuring out and adapting at that point and adjusting your strategy to meet the environment and at that time is critical. And without those feedback loops and
Definitely.
listening to our customers, you're not going to find that, right?
Yeah.
Now that we have a strategy and we know how to represent it, also, like, what happens after this?
The meat of the matter, right? The execution. It's time to get shit done. So when you are trying to do the execution, right? So I say that's start with three major things, right? You can read this amazing quote by Morris Chang that we have on the screen, but you need to define what is the most important thing right now. When you define what is the most important thing right now, you're going to focus on that and then do that as your first item of execution, right? As a team leader, you need to lead the way. You need to start small, and you need to, as I said earlier, fail, learn, evolve, and repeat. And in that manner, focus on the execution. So we are going to talk about this in a little while, right? This is not just a theory session that we are throwing in front of you. We're going to talk about execution. The execution is when, like, for a normal developer, let's say, the tasks and your stories and your subtasks, right? The strategy for the leadership can be those initiatives, those epics, those big level ideas that they were building in the portfolio level. We'll try to bring it to that, and just in the interest of time, maybe we should move forward a little bit so that we are able to connect that, Cidoni.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So let's look at how does that execution work, right? So we've already talked about how can we synchronize the team's daily effort. The most important and the most toughest thing to, at a lot of times for a project manager or teams to understand is where did things go wrong, and it mostly is planning, right? When your planning is done, you'll do the execution correctly as well. If you think everything will happen right at the execution, that's not an correct assumption as well. So for your waterfall, your execution can mean breaking things down into your WBS. For agile, your scrum projects, you could create your features, your epics, your backstories, and that's how you try to bring that strategy into your execution.
So that means all of these things that we create here from an execution standpoint to make the work happen, that has to be done correctly, right? What happens if we don't do it properly?
Oh, amazing things happen. Something like this, right? So when you don't have the correct expectation versus don't have the correct implementation, a lot of expectation versus reality kind of a situation comes into picture. You've come into places where something like this will happen when you're expecting immediate results, when you're expecting technology to solve all your problems, when you're expecting that maybe the change management is like one time activity, or like for example digital transformation is a project that you can do and like just move on and everything will become better, right? That will not happen. Customer experience is a journey that you'll have to take. The feedback loop has to be consistent and continuous so that you can always feed it back and make sure that what you're creating at the boardroom again comes back to the boardroom with feedback.
So, this picture basically explains it, right? If your strategy is not in the right place, your implementation could end up in another place, right? How do we avoid this?
One word: alignment. Teams entrusted with the responsibility of making decisions to these projects it's very important that they are in harmony with the organization's overarching vision and objectives. That these alignment is vital when they are making choices concerning design, coding methods, market research, or any other aspect. Understanding the team's role in advancing strategic goals is very important. But when that is not done, you keep having pitfalls in terms of understanding what the original ask was from the management and what is being delivered on the ground for short term gains. Right? By exposing these organizational teams to strategic goals very early and very frequently, we can build a culture where creativity moves towards achieving these goals. Right? Otherwise, there's creativity at the ground. People are trying to get things done, but they would not be able to link it back to the original purpose. So, this involves crafting comprehensive action plans that would encourage contributions from everyone, from communication teams to human resources, to finance, to legal, to the actual developers and testers. The days of strategy being confined to the boardroom are long gone.
Cool. I think this is great because I think this ties everything back, right? It's important for teams to know what they're doing is aligned to the vision and mission. So, I believe that this also in a way helps organizations and teams to take risks, right? Be, like you said, be more creative. When you're really thinking out of the box, there are chances that you might fail, but as long as it's aligned to the goal and the vision, it is bound to give you either at least a minimum, a good amount of learning, right, in the process, if at all you're not successful. So I think this is perfect, and I think we are around about time to, we should try to get to the demo soon. We'll try to do a quick recap. So what we have talked about so far is, how vision, strategy, and execution kind of, are connected with each other, right? When you're looking at strategy, though we call this session connecting strategy to execution, is really connecting vision to your execution, right? So it's, strategy is a means to do it. And it's important that we all understand a strategy is driven by the why that vision is stating, and really what we are going to do is what the strategy talks about, and then the execution is the how, right? So understanding this, let's try an example. And I showed you a few examples of OKRs where the objectives and the key results together represented the strategy. I'm going to come up with a vision statement for an organization, fictitious for now, right? Let's say make future of work seamless and enjoyable for every team across organizations, right? That's something you can kind of visualize, right? You can see that, okay, we want to make things more connected, seamless, and a happy environment where teams can thrive, right? That's the vision, right? Towards that, you could have, hey, I need some supporting products that teams can use. I want to gain some market share there so that people, that seamless work can happen, right? We want team members to be able to come in, be able to contribute faster, right? So those two are like the objectives you saw. I didn't have enough space on this slide here, so I didn't put the key results, but you guys get the idea now, right? It goes with the key results as well, right? So objectives and key results. And then we talk about the how. This is where the work breakdown happens, right? Whether it's in terms of your initiatives, your projects, programs, whatever, hierarchy of work that you identify that's geared towards that strategy. That's what you define after that, and then take it forward. With that, what we'll do is we'll jump to a demo. I'm going to stop share and bring up Jira so that I can show you how it could get represented in Jira.
While you do that, we have one question from Murli in the chat. Is the goals feature in Jira help with any of the objectives, KPIs, OKRs currently, or coming soon or later?
Okay.
Sorry,
I think
Cidoni,
the
did you
goals
hear the
one,
question?
yeah, I heard it.
Right.
I mean, are you referring, I'm assuming that it's referring to the Atlas goals, maybe. I'm not sure what exactly is meant by the goals feature particularly, but, at a minimum, I would say this, right? Whether there's an explicit feature or not, what you're going to see here is you can actually still do it even without needing that, right? It's really about how you organize the work to be able to see all of those things visually and then have it connected. And then a lot of these things that we talked about so far, you would have the foundation to actually move forward with. So this is what we are looking at here is, and I know I may not have fully answered your question, Murli, but feel free to join our Agile DevOps group room after this session. We'll be happy to dive deeper. So what I have is I try to represent the same thing that we discussed so far in Jira itself, right? Some of you may have seen this tool. This is the advanced roadmaps feature in Jira Cloud. I'm using a cloud instance. It's on premium version available, right? So in here I have set up a vision, and under that I have my OKRs objectives, right? So these are really my objectives. This is my vision. And then under that, I have my key results, right? So I've captured the key results. So if you see, these things are all rolling up, right? I could, let me see if I can change it to quarters. Yeah. And then you can actually, under that, I've identified a couple of initiatives, right? I have, for getting better revenue, we need to actually do more marketing. So, there's some social media campaigns and stuff like that as an initiative, right? Within that, they have a feature, or let's say in Jira's terms, an epic, if you are using epic as a feature. And then there's a handful of work happening under that. Now, if you see, there are different teams working on it. There's a marketing team trying to do some campaigns. There's some, let's say to be able to do this level of marketing, there's an upgrade needed from a platform team. There are some updates onto the website that's done by the website team. The key thing is all of these different teams are working towards that one single initiative, which ties to that objective, right? So this is the alignment we are talking about, right? When teams work on something, they know where am I, how is this important, right? What am I contributing to, right? The why, and that connection is key, right? So that people, when teams look at their work, they can actually see what we are trying to get to, right? We are really working towards the market share. Why is this important? Is your team is working at this level, right? On a day-to-day basis. And if you ask an engineer, if you ask a tester, if you ask anybody on a team, they would be making multiple decisions throughout the day, throughout the week, or towards the task they have at hand. How do you make sure that they are taking the right decisions? How do you make sure that they are thinking about the future, right? If you ask an engineer, they can tell you, you can design a set of things in a lot of different ways, how do you make those choices, right? You need to make sure that they have the North Star visible all the time, right? And that's why this kind of a view that rolls up all your execution activities to the strategy and mission is going to be very helpful, so that the teams, this is always in front of their mind, right? So this is, like I said, Jira advanced roadmaps. There are a handful more that I had added here as examples. It's the same concept, right? You can keep adding a lot of different initiatives across different teams. It doesn't have to be the same team, right? But you can roll all of those up into the corresponding objectives and key results. There's another tool, another add-on that Jira provides. It's called Structure. You can see that there as well. It gives you a slightly different perspective. It's a working tool as well. You can make changes in here directly to the tickets on any of the things, any of the Jira fields. Actually, you can pull into columns here. It can also give you the similar view, right? The one thing I like about Structure is it helps you group and build this hierarchy the way you want it, a little more in a little more flexible manner. You can set up rules that'll automatically pull anything that gets added into this hierarchy, and teams can see it. Now, one of the other interesting things I would like to show here is, in this case, grouped by the project, right? So you can actually see what each of these teams are owning towards that strategy and the vision. Now, if I go into one of these tickets, for example, let's go into the platform teams ticket, there is a way you can actually view that ticket in a structure view inside that project. And then when you're looking at that ticket, the teams can quickly get to, hey, where is it all lined up, right? How is my story rolling up to the strategy and vision? That's a quick view. I'm going to actually just hide this so we can get some space. Okay. So teams can get to that hierarchy from your ticket itself, right? Which is an easier way to keep your vision and strategy in front of the teams all the time. So
and I was just right before this, I was on a session with Erica and Brandon. I mean, they were talking about advanced roadmap, and they were talking about the same thing when they were talking about advanced roadmap, that you don't have to worry about sharing the entire plan and somebody coming in and making changes in your structure. You can share that view only kind of a link with your team members, making sure that they still have visibility to what the overarching vision or the target is, not just at a task level, but what their tasks are actually meaning, without making or risking any plan changes or any issues in the time that you might have spent creating that plan for the leadership. So that those ability you have in the tool, advanced roadmap, you have structure also, you can have that kind of a view where you do that kind of a thing. And it's very important for you to work with the team, and like not just the project managers, right? Like from the top down, that information needs to flow down, that you're doing this specific marketing task to impact the original vision in this manner.
Yeah, absolutely. And that can be done in two different ways also, actually, right? You might have situations where teams have already started working on something, right? Now you want to retroactively connect it to a strategy. It might have been there. It's just that, it was never connected, right? You could use a tool like Structure actually to make that connection, because both are existing. It's just not connected together. You can actually do that through links, through advanced roadmap hierarchies. There are multiple ways to do it, right? So you can actually do it retroactively, or, let's say it's brand new objective and brand new key result, And then you can actually go in here, and I'm not going to actually go ahead and do it, but you can create the stuff in line here, right? So think of, if you're a product manager, for example, right? You have the goal in front of you. Now you need to identify what initiatives should I actually do towards that goal. Then you can actually start building that here, right? Then by doing it, you are already, organically making the connection and maintaining it. So when the teams get to their, features or stories, and they start to break it down, they break it down under the initiative. They can do exactly the same thing. They can create, either use the same structure, or they can actually create another structure that'll just be for, let's say, this one particular initiative, and then create all their stuff under that. And in this view, it'll automatically show everything, right? So it's easy to build that connection and maintain it, right? One of the good things about this tool is that it doesn't make it another overhead, right? Where like, oh, you have to now figure out a way to go ahead and, figure all these links out and stuff like that. You can actually just naturally, as you create it, it builds that hierarchy. It also helps with different views, right? You can do, for planning, you might want to see a certain set of information. If I want to see the due date, I want to see fixed versions, assignees, estimates, stuff like that. Or when I'm trying to do tracking, actually I'm more interested in the status, right? Okay, that didn't change much. Okay, let's see another one. Data entry, right? So I'm actually interested more in actually making changes here. These are all editable too, so I could actually, let's take a progress view itself. Right? If I want to, let's say, start progress on one of these things, I could just go ahead and make the edit right here, right? So I'm saying, okay, that's selected for development, and then it'll change the status right there, right? So you can see the progress is rolling up too, which is nice, right? Because, this progress that you see here, and it will help you collapse at any level you want. So I'm going to collapse at that level. The 28%, where do you get that, right? How many project managers have been asked this question? How much percentage is complete, right? And the reality is, if you are a project manager on top of a set of agile teams, and you go ask them, they'll be like, hey, we cannot give you percentages, right? We work on stories sprint by sprint, right? You can define rules on how you want to calculate your percentage scores, right? As an organization, you can agree on this with your teams, and say, if you have started some work, I'm going to count it as 10%, 20%, whatever that is, right? Just to get a gauge, right? Again, I wouldn't take this 28 versus 27.5 to the heart and then be worried about it, right? It gives you like, okay, we are kind of, we just started, little over started, right? That's all that means. But it'll help you roll up all of that, right? So if you see, based on the work that's getting done, it's really calculating the total rolling up all the way, right? So it's not just connecting execution and towards the strategy, but it's also telling you how much the execution has contributed and how much you have advanced in the execution steps. Again, from an agile standpoint, I also want to maintain caution here, right? This progress is amount of work done, right? This may not reflect the amount of value delivered, right? That you have to think as to, your story should reflect that, right? Your story should say, what value you're trying to deliver, and that's a different metric, right? And you could track those two, but do not confuse both. All right, so how are we doing on time? Okay, I think we have
almost, but there are some
time.
questions, really interesting questions, Cidoni.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the share and then bring up the other presentation back up. And then
so Ryan says this could replace any need for a third-party PPM tool with complicated integrations, assuming structure has better reporting than native Atlassian ones, which are sometimes lacking.
Yeah, I don't want structure to be confused as a reporting tool. Yes, it looks like you can produce reports, you can actually see things, right? Like I was saying earlier, and I'm happy to show afterwards in the Agile room. You can adjust the groups, adjust the rules on those generators to see things the way you want it, right? But it's also a working tool. I was showing you how the status changes, right? How you could actually adjust pretty much all of the Jira fields there, right? So it's more of a working tool than a reporting tool, but it does provide very valuable information if you construct the structure the way you want it to reflect the data, right? So you just need to figure out the rules to group or slice or dice these things to get the information you need. But if you're really looking for aggregated information, stuff like that, you may want to use something like an ECBI or Power BI integrations or things like that, where it can be a lot more analytics on steroids situation, right? Where this is not intended for that purpose, but it can still give you a good handle on the execution, right? And it can give you a good handle on asking the right questions, uncovering your hotspots, right? And then getting to the bottom of, okay, here are some issues that you may want to address.
Perfect. Murlidhar says good representation. That's how OKR's goals rolls up to vision and can see the individual OKR. Is there any way we can link the corresponding work across all projects who are contributing those OKRs and goals and see how they are trending off track or on track?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what we saw also, right? In the example that I mentioned, and then, like I said, I'm happy to bring that up in the other room once more if you want to take a closer look. The social media marketing campaign example actually had the marketing team doing some stuff, the platform team doing some stuff, the website team doing some stuff, all towards the same even initiative in this case, right? And it can be spread across multiple initiatives too, right? And the things could contribute to multiple initiatives. It says a many to many in some cases. It is representable in the tool. It's just about how you link them and how you establish that hierarchy.
Right. One final Q&A is in structure. When you reach the issue level, can you view it in a board or only in a list view?
There is not a board view. The structure actually gives you a Gantt chart view also. If you want, you can extend that to Gantt view. You can see the resources view and stuff like that, resource utilization in terms of like how many hours are pre-allocated and whatever. Board view is not there, but you could, I didn't show that actually. So if you click on the ticket, actually your issue detail view shows up on the right side, right? So it's exactly the same issue detail view that you would have when you click on a card on a board. It has that. Now, again, I don't know the premise of the question, but if you're thinking of, hey, can structure replace a board? We have, personally, I had tried that with one of the teams, and they actually liked it because, we could group by sprints, right? And then you're looking at only the current sprint. So when you group by the sprints, you can see all sprints and including your backlog all collapsed as a list. But then in the stand-up, you just open that sprint group by status, right? So then you can actually see what's in progress and teams can move things there. But it also gives you a quick view as like, okay, here we are doing something here. Do we have a follow-up item in the next sprint? Quick reference, right? It's right there. So you can open the other sprint and see. So there are a lot of benefits there. It could be a replacement if you're thinking from that point of view.
And sold. Then I think in the interest of time, thank you everybody for joining us on this session. We are both going to sit at the Trundl Agile DevOps room. Please show up there if you have any specific question. If you want to talk more about Agile, if you want to talk more about Scrum, Kanban, Scaled Agile, we have a bunch of topics out there. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop by, say hello. Thank you for joining and have a great day.
Right. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.